Shabbat, a shelter or a haven in time that we get to experience. And so, appropriately then, as we've done so traditionally down through the years and throughout the centuries, in fact, throughout the world, we welcome Shabbat. We welcome Shabbat the traditional way, by literally welcoming Shabbat. So I invite you to stand, face the door as if you were welcoming someone through the door, because in effect, that's what you're doing. You're welcoming the great Queen, Shabbat. And as you respond with Lechato D on pages 14 to 25, as Jacob leads us, note all the wonderful messianic images that are found there. These also point to the time that will come in the future. That's the time of eternal Shabbat, which is the messianic age. So that's what we welcome, and that is what we anticipate as we join on pages 14 to 25.
Lechato di likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, ishmi'anu el ham yuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, l'shemo tiferet v'litila. Lechato di likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. Lechato di likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. Lekrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mikor habracha. Merosh mikadem nasucha, sof maaseh hamachshava tchila. Lechato di likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. Lechato di likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. Hitorari, ki be'urech kumihori. Uri, shir de be'eri, kivod Adonai alayich nikla. Lechato di likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. Lechato di likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Observe and remember, in a single statement, the unique God caused us to hear his command. He alone is Lord, and his name is unique to his fame and splendor and praise. Together, come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Let's go to meet the Sabbath, for she is the source of blessing from the beginning, anointed from ancient days, though made last, conceived first. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Wake up, your light is come. Arise, shine, awake, awake. Sing a grand song. The glory of God is revealed to you. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath.
You may be seated. wake up, your light has come. What is the context for that? The previous verse, which talks about the arrival, bringing us redemption, of Jesse's son, the Bethlehemite. Appropriate words for this particular, for any evening, but this particular evening, because our Haftarah portion this evening is preceded by the paragraph that announces the arrival of the one from Bethlehem. And that is part of what Lechadodi and Shabbat pictures. So as we light the Shabbat lights this evening, we are reminded that Shabbat stands as the permanent guarantee of the ongoing and, in fact, permanent relationship we have with our God, because he said that's the way he would have it.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvato v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has set us apart by your commandments and commanded us to light the candles for the Sabbath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvato v'tzivanu lahiyot or l'goyim, v'natan manu Yeshua Mashiachenu ha'or la'olam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to be a light for the nations, and gave us Yeshua our Messiah, the light of the world. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Part of the Parsha for this evening is, in fact, the selection from which we derive Matovu, or actually Matovu derives directly from it. How goodly are your tents, of Jacob. That was the reality that strange prophet that wandered into Israel's history for a brief moment, that he too understood, and we need to understand that same reality, that God is present among his people, and now his people are therefore in his presence. Matovu gives us part of that reality as we now respond. And Jacob leads. Pages 142 to 145. We are in God's actual presence.
Atovu ohalecha Yaakov mishchedotecha Yisrael Atovu ohalecha Yaakov, bishchenotecha Yisrael, vani berov chasdecha avo v'tzecha estachavei el hekal kadeshecha v'yiratecha.
How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. O Lord, through your abounding faithful love, I come into your house, and reverently I worship you in your holy sanctuary. I love being in your house, the place where your glory resides. Here I bow down to worship you, my Lord and Maker. Accept my prayer, O Lord, and answer with your great mercy and with your saving truth. Amen. Together. How lovely are your tabernacles, O Lord of hosts! I long, yes, I pine for the courts of the Lord. My heart joyfully sings to the living God. One thing have I asked of the Lord, that I will pursue, that I may live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the graciousness of the Lord, and to enter his sanctuary. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me in the right path. With you is the fountain of life. In your light do we see light.
We thank God that he's allowed us to enter into his sanctuary, or as Jacob read earlier, reverently, I worship you in your holy sanctuary. Being in that sanctuary means we're in effect in the very throne room of God himself. And as we enter that throne room, we find ourselves responding to him as we do on pages 138 and 139, our Tehillah Tabrik Hadashah portion this evening. We'll do this the way we've become accustomed to doing it. You get the parts that are in quotation marks. Since this is a Friday evening and your brain is taken off for the weekend, the quotation marks are those funny, squiggly little things above the line. I'll take the parts that are not. I will join you in the closing. A couple lines of response. And the text begins. V'kol gadol le'mor ha'yeshua le'Elohenu ha'yoshev al ha'kisei v'laseh. And they cried out in a loud voice,
Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise.
Then I heard every creature in heaven, on earth, under the earth, on the sea, and all that is in them, singing,
To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever. Amen. Praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and strength be to our God forever and ever. Amen.
You will notice that there is a second person that's introduced onto this, or into this scene, also by the throne. And so we understand, as the rabbis of old did, who that person is, as we continue to respond in that throne room scene with pages 40 and 41, Elohim Asher. He is, in fact, the Messiah himself, who is elsewhere called the Lamb of God.
Elohim asher diber mikadem be'amim rabot u'bidrakim rabot el havot be'yan ha'nevi'im diber aleinu be'acharit hayamim ha'eleh Sam Leo Reshko Uyado Gamasa et Haolamim Uzohar Kevodo Veselem Asmuto Venoseko Bivaro In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets at many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority beside the Majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
He sits there as the one behind the guarantee that we will experience all that we anticipate through Shabbat, as mentioned by Lachadodi. And so our response then is, as we rise now and face Jerusalem, the direction of the ark, our response then is found in the abridged portion of the Amidah, and we'll be only doing the bridge, not the summary. Our response is lengthen that we may get to see the days of the Messiah in our day. Oh, and what are we doing in the meantime? Well, that's paragraph 6. As we await that reality to take place, we experience another reality, that he is with us on a daily basis, evening, morning, and noon. Pages 60 to 61 use those words to shape your response, and then turn to pages 76 to 79 and to continue that response. May we see the lengthening of the light of your Messiah. And until then, we trust our lives into your loving hand and care. Baruch atah Adonai. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shemcha uchatna na'eh lechodot. Blessed are you, O Lord, whose name is good, and to whom it is pleasant to give thanks. You may be seated. The line before that line says, all the living shall thank you and praise your name faithfully, because you are the God of salvation and deliverance. So now as we respond with half Kaddish from pages 4 to 7, those of you who count yourselves as among the living, I invite you to respond in praise with this selection. Pages 4 to 7.
יתגדל ויתגדש מרבה ועמדיו כקיבוצי וימליך מלכותי וחיי כל וביום כל וחיי לכל בית ישראל בגללו בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן יעיש מרבה מבורך לעולם לא בעולמה יתברך
יתברך וישבח ויתבעט ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמת את קודשה בריחו לאלה לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו Amen. Let his name be glorified and sanctified throughout the universe which he created according to his purpose. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom in your lifetime, in your days, and in the lifetime of all the house of Israel, speedily, soon. And let all say, Amen. Let his great name be praised forever and ever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, magnified and lauded be the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, although he is far greater than all blessings, hymns, praises, and songs which are offered in the world. And all say, Amen.
Since he is truly far greater than all blessings, hymns, praises, and songs which are offered in the world, it is for that reason that we appropriately ask that question that is raised by Mikamoka. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders? And that then forms our response at this point as well. And so we praise our exalted God, page 44 and 45. Blessed is he who is to be blessed. Moses and the people of Israel sang a song to you with great joy. They all said, and now we all say,
Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders? Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora tahilot osef elei Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh Nora tahilot osef
Having raised the question, we need to answer the question, and we do so on pages 88 and 89 with the words of Ein Kamoka. There is none like you, O Lord, among the gods, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders. Jacob leads, and then we respond.
Ein kamocha ba'elim Adonai Ein kamocha nedar b'kodesh Nora tahilot osef elei osef elei There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimalach Le'olam Va'ed. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
His sovereignty extends throughout all generations. We acknowledge that his sovereignty extends through our generation as we rise and respond with the words that personally apply those affirmations to our lives. Pages 34 to 39, we face Jerusalem yet again as we say to our God, yes, you are sovereign over my life.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad הוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אלוהיך בכל לבבך וכל נפשך וכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך ביום על לבביך, ושננתם לבניך, ודיברתם בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ושכבך וקומך, וקשרתם נגרות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בעיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands, and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
The reality that we just expressed or affirmed for ourselves will in fact be the reality that extends throughout the entire world. When the words that we expressed on pages 88 and 89 by even so in effect come true. It's the time when from Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem.
ויהי בנשוא הארון ויאמר משה, קום אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך, כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ולבוא אדוני בירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, לעמו ישראל b'kedushato. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel.
Having given this tremendous treasure to his people and those who are connected with them now respond. On page 133.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, the voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
We are grateful for your words, the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We will hear your words that we may learn them, love them, live them.
Well, what does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
All the Lord has said, we will do.
He shebarach avotenu Abraham, Yitzchak, veYaakov. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless John, may he bless Matt, may he bless Don, may he bless Sharon, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruchu et HaMavorach. Baruch Adonai HaMavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu michol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. Bless the Lord who is blessed. Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Vayare Balak ben Zippor et kol asher asa Yisrael ve'emori. Vayagar Moav mipnei ha'am ma'od ki rav hu. Vayachatz Moav mipnei b'nei Yisrael. Vayomer Moav el ziknei Midyan. Ata yilakachu HaKahal et kol zvivotenu kilchoch hashur et yerek hasadeh uvalak ben Zippor melech lamoav ba'et hahi. Please be seated. Balak, son of Zippor, saw all which the Israelites had done to the Amorites, or all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was very afraid of the people because they were many. Moab was exceedingly afraid of the children of Israel. Moab said to the elders of Midian, "This company will lick up all that is around us, like the ox licks up the grass of the field." Balak, son of Zippor, was king of Moab at that time. Balak, king of Moab, saw Israel and the beginning of the conquest of Canaan, and he was afraid. So he called the strange prophet of God, whom we often cite, Balaam. Balak wanted to kill the children of Israel, and he recognized that whomever Balaam blessed was really blessed, and whomever he cursed really was cursed. Balaam was truly a prophet of God and not the prophet of an idol, which is just a lifeless statue. Balaam's efficacy and blessings and curses came not from himself, but from God. Balaam was more or less a mouthpiece, so when Balak came with his request, Balaam replied that he can only speak what God puts in his mouth to say. The result is, of course, that the people of Israel are blessed by God. Not only can Balaam not curse them, he ends up blessing them right in front of Balak. This makes me think of the nature of blessing in general. What does it mean to be blessed? For the nation of Israel, it means that they would be protected from the plans of its enemies. And I believe that protection has extended throughout history to us and into the modern day. I also believe that this protection extends not only to Jews, but also to Gentiles who have joined with us in worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. and to the worldwide community of believers in the Messiah Yeshua, called generally the church. This is a general blessing to protect God's people from harm and to provide for her needs. However, there is another blessing, and it comes from living out the Torah. The blessing comes from study and from incorporating the practices of Torah into our way of life. We see from Parsha Re'eh and Nitzavim that this type of blessing is less general and it's more conditional, as the life and blessings come from living out the Torah, and the consequences or curses come from living contrary to it. This is what happened later in tonight's Parsha. Balaam could only give Israel a blessing because that is what God had for them, a blessing. However, Balaam was able to sneak in curses by tempting Israel into wrongdoing. And from that wrongdoing came the curse, that is to say, the punishment that rightly follows wrongdoing. We are already blessed in general as followers of God. He is looking out for us and providing for our needs. But we should also tap into the source of the blessing that comes from devotion to study and to good deeds. And we should be careful to avoid the consequences that come from neglecting that calling. I'd like to mention here that blessing means providence and protection, but it does not necessarily mean that we will be insulated from the problems that come from our bad decisions or from willfully doing like evil things or selfish things. One other thing I'd like to add here is that in the Pirkei Avot it says the reward is in proportion to the effort. So the more you try, the better it goes. Sometimes it takes a lot. Anyway, shortly we will perform one of my favorite parts of the liturgy, Eitz Chaim. We hold the Torah up and we call it a tree of life. And we raise it during that prayer to symbolize it growing within us into a mighty tree whose limbs are weighed down with the fruits of wisdom and mitzvot. Don't let that just be a symbol. Cling to the Torah, for it is our life. Work hard in your studies and in doing good deeds, for God sees how we act and how we live, and He blesses us when we get it right. Shabbat Shalom.
Numbers 24, verse 3 to 9, and then 17 to 19. And he made this pronouncement: This is the speech of Balak, son of Beor, the speech of the man whose eyes have been opened, the speech of him who hears God's words, who sees what Shaddai sees, who has fallen yet has open eyes. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your encampments, O Israel. They spread out like valleys, like gardens by the riverside, like succulent aloes planted by Adonai, like cedar trees next to the water. Water will flow from their branches, their seed will have water plenty. Their king will be higher than Agag, and his kingdom lifted high. God who brought them out of Egypt gives them the strength of a wild ox. When they lie down, they crouch like a lion, or like a lion. Who dares to rouse them? Blessed be all people, blessed be all who bless you. Cursed be all who curse you. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not soon. A star will step forth from Jacob, a scepter will arise from Israel. Israel will do valiantly. From Jacob will come someone who will rule.
From Jacob will come one who will rule. A star will rise in Jacob. Wonderful wonderful prediction that also relates to the introduction to the Haftarah tonight, about the one who comes, or who came to us through the town of Bethlehem.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו את תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the truth, the Torah of truth and life everlasting, planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
He gave to us the Torah, these words, to impact our lives. And so we recognize that that's what they are, the very words of God. As we now stand before him, as our ancestors stood before him and said, this is the Torah, which God delivered to us directly from the hand of Moses. Pages 98 and 99 for the response. If you need the transliteration, that's page 95.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated.
I'm reading Ephesians 4:17 through 24. So I tell you this, and affirm it from the Lord. Don't behave any longer like heathens who are hopelessly confused. Their understanding is clouded, and they are strangers to the life that comes from God due to their ignorance and stubbornness. They have lost all sensitivity, and so they have turned themselves over to their vices and greedily indulge in immoral behaviors. However, that's not what you learned from the Messiah. You have certainly heard about him and were taught the truth that comes from Yeshua. So with respect to your former life, get rid of that old self of yours, deceived and corrupted as it was by evil inclinations. Adopt transformed thoughts and attitudes and put on your new self, the one God created in God's image, to be genuinely holy.
As Matt suggested, these are words that should impact our lives as they take deep root in our lives, which is why we then respond as we now do with Etzchaim. Renew our days as a whole. Pages 96 and 97 is that response. Make it your personal one this evening.
It's time
Take happiness to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
Uvnu Yomar reminds us on pages 98 and 99 that with our days renewed as of old, we are better equipped to stand before our God as his priest and respond in gratitude, as we now do, as we stand before him, and we in fact respond in gratitude, using pages 98 and 99.
Uvnu Yomar, Shuba Adonai Vivavot Alfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, "Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah." I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
Shabbat school is excused. Over the last month or so, due to our temperatures reaching the mid-90s, I made a rather startling discovery. It's time to permanently break out the shorts and the sandals and put away the jeans and the gym shoes. And I'm sure all of you also reached that same earth-shattering conclusion. It's time to put away our winter, spring clothes, which we would love to be able to wear for another month or two, and to face, you'll pardon me for saying it this way, the harsh, cold reality that summer is here. I do appreciate that response, by the way. It's long past time, in other words, for a change of wardrobe. Now, it wasn't so long ago that my ever-watchful wife, Dr. Patrice, took a long look at my suit, the most recent wedding, and announced in a way that was intended to leave absolutely no room for discussion, "You really need a new suit." And I'm sure we've all had similar experiences to these, where we realize that it's time to change our clothes. Now, because this is such a common experience, Ralph Shaul chose to use this very image to communicate some vital principles about how we should live. In other words, as followers of Yeshua, it's high time that we changed our clothes. So he says, first of all, and you see it in the outline that's included with the inserts, he says, take it off. Take it all off. I'll leave that sink in for a minute. And he says this with respect to what you were like. First of all, he says, don't live the way you used to any longer. So I tell you this, he says, as you see it in the translation supplied in the inserts, I tell you this and affirm it from the Lord. Don't behave any longer like this. Most translations have live or walk at this particular point. But as you see in this translation, it really means behave. He had said something very similar at the beginning of this chapter. And so the repetition here then indicates that behavior or conduct are important to God. And that's typically the Jewish perspective. We're told throughout, not so much what we should believe, but how we should behave. And so Yeshua said at the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, I want you to live as lights that are set on a hill so people can see how you live and what you do and respond to God. Not so that they can learn what you believe and so that they can come into that particular similar knowledge, but how you live so that they can see God in your lives. The rabbis call that Kiddush Hashem. Live in a way that God gets the credit. And in fact, this rabbi said just a couple of chapters ago, we looked at it, I know it seems like a long time ago, because it was a number of months ago. He said, not only did we enter into a relationship with our God because of his graciousness as he has always extended in the past, Ephesians 2:8-9, but this was done Ephesians 2:10. So, to remind you that you've been created in Yeshua the Messiah to live or behave in such a fashion, often translated, exhibiting good works or good behavior. And note he says, I tell you, and in fact, in a sense he's saying, I tell you and insist on it, as some translations have it. Or here we have it, I affirm this. This tells us something about the seriousness of what God is communicating through the rabbi. It raises the question, so how did they act? How did they behave, which they should now abandon this kind of behavior? Well, don't behave any longer like heathens who are hopelessly confused. Their understanding is clouded, and they are strangers to the life that comes from God due to their ignorance and stubbornness. Wow. Well, what's he saying here? Let me try to rephrase it and fill it out for you just a little bit. What he's referring to here was a former manner of life that involved a meaningless, frustrating existence. One in which they didn't see clearly. Particularly what they didn't see clearly is ultimate issues and ultimate reality. And so they were floundering. In fact, he says you were cut off from the very source of real life. He says you're ignorant about real life. You were ignorant about ultimate reality, namely relating to God. And if that's not enough, there's more. Verse 19. They have lost all sensitivity, and so they've turned themselves over to their vices and greedily indulge in immoral behaviors. They lost all sensitivity. In other words, they stopped caring. And then he says they pursued outrageous conduct, or what we often call vices. Then he describes that former manner of life as greed for more, a continual greed for more, disregard for the rights of others. That's how he describes their former manner of life and the life of many of those around them. But the point he's making here that we should not miss is not how horrible all that was. The point is that our lives should be different than before. Our lives should be different from others around us, different from this sad picture. And usually we respond, no problem. But let's not respond too quickly. Are we living in this way? Are you living differently than before with respect to attitudes and values and priorities? This has to do with lifestyle and an outlook on life. And he says, don't live that way anymore. So first he talks about what you were like. And then he says, now regarding what you learned in the next couple verses. He says, now live like you're someone else. Live like you're someone else. He said you didn't, the text says here, you didn't learn, you didn't come to know the Messiah in this way, or as our translation has it, that's not what you learned from him. What's not? What is mentioned in the previous number of verses. By the way, some translations, including the ones at the end of your pews, not the ones that are actually in the pews in front of you, it has here, as do other translations, at the beginning of verse 21, if you have heard about him. There's no if about this if, by the way. The text literally is not talking about doubt or certainty. It's talking about, this is a specific conditional construction, which talks about emphasis. In other words, surely you have heard, or as our translation has it, you have certainly heard about it. So what were we supposed to learn so certainly? It has to do with the truth, in the second part of that verse. A truth which, as the verse indicates for us, is embodied in Yeshua. A truth of which he was the living demonstration and example, and therefore becomes our model or our pattern. And what does that model or pattern begin to look like? Well, he begins to spell out some of that in verses 22 to 24 in the principles found there. In verse 22, he says, so with respect to your former life, get rid of that old self of yours, deceived and corrupted, as it was by evil inclinations. Or as the outline has it for you, take off those old junky clothes. Look, the picture that's here is very clear. It's taking off the old clothes. In fact, it's viewed in such a way as you might say, get rid of the rags. That stuff, he says, in the words that he uses on, and what the connotations that underlie it, that kind of stuff belongs in the garbage can. That's why he says it's corrupted. That means it's decaying, it's rotted. It's been rotted by deceitful desires or by the old way of life. Old self, very interesting term. Some translations have old man. That's not a reference to me, by the way. What that old self, thank you for laughing at that. What that old self means is explained by the context. It's talking about the former manner of life, your former outlook on life. The Bibles at the end of your pews put it this way, the old you. That's nicely put, actually. But some people will say, particularly those who are somewhat familiar with the text of the Newer Testament, but wait. The rabbi also says in Romans 6 that the old man has been crucified. Is that not so? And he also says that baptism, or as we would understand it in our Jewish context, the mikveh has illustrated just that death. Isn't that what he said? Yes. And yes. Do we have a contradiction here then? No. Rav Shul is not so dumb as to contradict himself. What he's talking about is a different aspect of the same reality. Look, it's like a snake skin. The skin is dead, and so it needs to be shed. Like the poetry. I get paid big bucks for it. The skin is dead, and so it needs to be shed. Which is why the Bibles I referenced just a minute ago phrase it this way: throw it off! Throw it off! Therefore, live in light of the reality that he's talking about. Commit yourself. By the way in which this is constructive is it's commit decisively. Commit yourselves decisively to living in to living in light of this reality of the new self. He says, take it off, take it all off, get rid of it. The metaphor is that of stripping off our old ways of behaving and of looking at things. And then he says, having done that, break out the new wardrobe in the next couple verses. There's a twofold contrast with the old self or the old you here. The first part is verse 23. He says, adopt transformed thoughts and attitudes. In other words, be made new in this fashion, or be renewed, as the verb says more technically. Be renewed. He says it has to do with a new attitude of mind. And when he's talking about those kinds of things, it has to do with the very center or the core of our being. Attitude, not just appearance. Character, not just clothes. In other words, it works from the inside out. That's why attitudes and thoughts, as the Bible at the end of the pews reminds us. Our translation says again, adopt transformed thoughts and attitudes. Clean up the inside, he says, before you work on the outside. Let's put it back into the metaphor. Shower before you get dressed. It is what it says. Doesn't it? That's what mine says. Okay. The terms that are used here by the rabbi are interesting. They have the connotation of young in contrast to old. So what is being hinted at here is perpetual renewal of youth. Again, those Bibles in the pews translated very nicely yet again. Constantly changing. In other words, he's talking about continually growing. Not continually growing old, but continually growing young. What's the name of that movie? Benjamin Button? Okay. Some of you get that, otherwise Google it later. Live in contrast to, in fact, as opposite to, what was mentioned in the earlier verses, 17 and 18. Leave that stuff behind. So he's talking now about some fresh input, some fresh impressions, new ways of thinking and responding. Which raises the question, and what keeps us youthful and vigorous and renewed in this fashion? Well, the rabbi answers those questions in another text. This is when he was writing to his student Titus. He says, you're renewed by the word of God and the work of the Spirit of God. But we already knew that because we've read Psalm 1, which talks about the renewing effects of the word of God. We've also read Ezekiel, which I'll get to in a minute, which talks about the renewing work of the Spirit of God. But first, let's take a look at that second contrast with the old. It's found in verse 24. He says, put on the new self, the new you, the recreated you. And put on the new self, verse 24 says, the one created in God's image to be genuinely holy. He's talking about something that's fresh and vibrant, a fresh, vibrant personality, in contrast with the decaying old lifestyle. And one he describes as created like God. He's taking us back to the original creation. We call it Tselem Elohim, the image of God in the person. In other words, it has to do with God's character and his personness, social interaction. It's all part of that image. He describes it in our text as holiness and righteousness, according to some translations. Those who've commented on this particular book in this particular chapter often have said, well, holiness is your responsibility toward God. Righteousness has to do with your responsibility to people. And in a sense, that makes sense. We responded tonight that I will love the Lord my God with all my heart, with all my life, with all my strength. As I do what? As I impress these things, as these things are on my heart, what? God's instructions, and I impress them on my children. That becomes a definition of what God instructs us in Leviticus 19:2. Be holy, as I, the Lord your God, am holy. It's the character of God being expressed by his people. Righteousness, badly misunderstood in our day and age in most religious circles. The Hebrew word, tzedakah. And if you've been around in the Jewish community long enough, you'll understand fully. The usual translation for us of tzedakah doesn't even use the word righteousness, does it? It has to do with what we do for other people by way of compassion and giving. Which is why one of the prominent Israeli rabbis has chosen to describe tzedakah as compassionate righteousness. So it has to do with compassion, and it has to do with rightness. Look, from a Semitic perspective, the perspective of the ancient Near East, rightness has to do with what you do or how you behave. From the Hellenistic perspective, or the Western world kind of perspective, rightness has to do with being right. Those are two different things. And since this happens to be a Jew, from the ancient Near East who's writing this to a Jewish audience, guess which version we should be focusing on? It has to do with doing right. Now look, and doing it compassionately. That's a pretty lofty ideal. And it raises the question, so what's involved? In other words, how do we clothe ourselves with this new self, with this new you? Well, the answer is found in the bottom of the outline. We need to dress for success. But you'll notice those verses go beyond the verses read for tonight, and those are the verses for next week. So you got to come back next week for the rest of the story. But I at least wanted to set the stage for it at this point. God wants us to get rid of the rags and to dress in a style that's appropriate to our status as members of his family, and one that reflects the change he has made in our lives, a change he secured with great effort and at great cost. And once again, bouncing back to our Haftarah passage for this evening, the prophet Micah summarizes it in those classic words. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to live and love kindly, and to walk humbly with your God. That's the set of clothes we're to exhibit. The way he wants us to live might seem like a pretty high ideal, but he's given us some suggestions we've begun to unfold, and several clues that are in this passage that enable us to reach that ideal. Please remember that a decisive commitment is involved. We must decide, that's the way in which the grammar is constructed, we must decide to take off the old way of doing things and put on the new. We need to remember as well that the renewal process works from the inside out. It begins with our attitudes, which in turn need to be shaped by his word. And it should result in reflecting more of the character of God to others around us. The ultimate resource, he'll get to this, but not in this chapter. It is in the next chapter. The ultimate resource for renewal is the Ruach Hashem, the Spirit of God. And as we'll discover then, so let me summarize for you now, as we've hinted at earlier in our journey through this particular book. As we draw on his power and rely on his working in us and trust that he is active in our lives, then he, the Spirit of God, will enable us to live as the new creations that we really are and were always intended to be. Or as Rav Shaul puts it in our particular text for tonight, it's high time to change our clothes. Transformed thoughts and a new you. Well, take some time to think about what your wardrobe is like as we reflect in quiet for just a minute or two. If we're ready to respond positively to the challenge to change our clothes that is mentioned here by the rabbi of old, then it's appropriate for us to respond as we now do with the Elena, pages 102 to 107. Please remember that part of that response acknowledges that our calling is our task. This is part of our task. If you're willing to take on the task, by all means, bow at the appropriate spot. If you're not sure about it, bowing probably wouldn't be such a good idea. So please rise, face Jerusalem yet again, in the direction of the ark, as we anticipate when not just us, but the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. Pages 102 to 107.
עלינו לשבח באדום הכל, אתם כאילו לארץ בראשית, שלא עשינו ככל הרצות, ולא סבלנו כפי שכל האדמה, שלא שם קלקלנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינה זו, וגבי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו, אמת מלכנו, אפס ולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, הידעת היום, והשם אותה, אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינו.
It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for He has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs, our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings there is none like Him. For He stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greater Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled. The Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one.
V'ne'emar v'hayadonai lamelech al kol haaretz vayom hahu yehyeh Adonai echad u'shemo
You may be seated.